I mean, you published like medical works already. At the age of 19, you started your influencer platform. You're in Cornell. You're doing all these things. What do you think is like one tip every student should keep in mind if they want to increase their capacity to do what matters for them, or just to handle life?
I think as students, as humans, we tend to mask the things that we're going through because we want it to seem like we're okay. Because we have that standard within ourselves. Because society has that kind of standard. And I think it's finally time that we have some of that vulnerability, have that struggle. You know, looking back on it, you'd be really surprised. I would be really surprised that I'm telling myself I'm really glad I had that struggle.
Oh, wow.
Because there's those leaps that you go through, and there's a lot of lessons that you learn throughout the process.
We should just name this episode, How to Make $1,000.
How to Make $1,000.
And cheat sheets. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Chasing Lightning podcast, where I help you live slow, move fast, and start things so you can do so sustainably. And I am on break. So the reason why I'm not in the usual studio or even in my other, in my first episode I recorded in my room, is because I'm actually in my aunt and grandma's house. Shout out to them. And it's funny. I was looking over today's episode. I was reviewing it, editing it. And something was like missing. I couldn't put my finger on it until I realized, oh shoot, I don't think I recorded an intro for this. So here we are. And it's a very cozy space. I love like the greenery, the backgrounds, the ferns. It's a lovely space. So check it out. If you're listening to this on audio, it's really nice. So today's guest, okay, let me run down the list. She's an entrepreneur, an advocate, fitness influencer, a researcher of endocrinology, and student at Cornell University. And on top of all that, she's a biomedical engineering student, and she builds medtech stuff. And just based on that list, she's ready to take over the world. Extremely high capacity individual, and just an extraordinary person to be around, an amazing friend. In our conversation, we just dive into how we can let our struggles. I think that was my bird. In this conversation, sorry for context. My aunt and my grandma, they own a bird. He's amazing. Shout out to Pijito. Put like a photo of him right there. And if you hear any like bird noises, that's just him. But as I was saying, she and I had this amazing conversation on how we can let our struggles transform who we are so that we can have more capacity to do incredible things, but to also ground us in our health. So if you're a person who wants to develop a high capacity to do the things that your vision is calling you to do, or not even that, maybe even if you want to find that vision so you can be so focused on finding the right opportunities in your career, then this conversation is for you. So ladies and gentlemen, this is my conversation with Maryam Bellakbira. Maryam, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I know you have like a really busy schedule. Like you've been traveling from place to place. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on with your traveling?
Yo, we're living in answered prayers. Because the way this traveling schedule has got me back and forth, going here, going there, it's honestly such a blessing. It's something I've really asked for.
Yeah.
Recently, we just got back from Chicago and Indiana for a graduate school program.
Yeah.
In the future, we're now back in DC, going to fly back to New York tomorrow.
Wow.
And we have multiple conferences on the way. We're doing some really big research, so about every week I will be flying somewhere. I will be sending you pictures.
Can't wait to see them.
I'm excited.
What is this all for? Can you tell us a bit about what is this all? Why are you traveling this much? Why are you putting this all on yourself? And kind of while doing that, kind of try to like tell us a bit about what do you even do? Because I think that there's a lot that ties into what you're trying to do. And but go ahead and just tell us like why are you traveling this much? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish to all this? Because there's like a lot.
That's a really great question. That's a really great question. So I'm currently a hormone scientist, aspiring biomedical engineer. One big thing about me is there's this really fascinating statistic that about 80% of women have some sort of hormonal abnormality. And it doesn't mean, and we know a lot of it is not diagnosed. We know that there are these diagnoses, but there's nothing to really do about it. They're kind of telling you to do this, do that, with limited resources. So one thing about me is the reason for this busy scrumptious traveling schedule is because I'm trying to make a device for ultimate hormone data collection so we can be able to identify these hormonal abnormalities, how they're caused, and be able to find this being able to prevent individuals from suffering with these hormonal abnormalities. So you might know somebody who has PCOS or Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, or something along those lines.
Wait, sorry to interrupt. These are all big words. I'm not sure if I 100% know what they mean. Could you tell us a little about like what are the roots of this? Because I know you just mentioned a couple words and describe them. What are these things?
So ultimately, these hormone disorders, they're ultimately hormone disorders.
Yeah.
So the way our hormones interact with our body, they affect absolutely everything. Everything from our mood to our reproductive system, to our skin, to the quality of our thoughts. Our hormone system regulates ultimately almost everything. It all starts from your brain and goes into your endocrine system.
Okay.
Or your endocrine system, or your organs within your endocrine system.
I know you said that. There was a great explanation, by the way. Thank you for the follow-up. We just talked about you're traveling all these different conferences, and you're figuring out how to solve these really big problems, all hormonal related. And now you go to, and then by the way, Maryam goes to Cornell. I'm not sure if you mentioned that earlier. Which, as we know, is like a big baller school for what you're trying to do too, right?
Yes, really big research.
It's a lot. It's huge. Huge. And I want to go back. So we know what you're doing. You're traveling this much. You said you're living in a season of answered prayers, right? We also got to talk about faith later in the podcast. It's so exciting. But I really want to now take a step back.
Okay.
Because, you're doing all these things. How old are you? Like 20?
I'm 19 years old.
19? Okay, you're 19. You're doing all these things. It's remarkable. And I would love to know, can you take us back to a time where this really started?
Yeah. I think every really big, important thing that people are doing in our lives, like for instance, we're surrounded by so many ambitious individuals. We're in college, we're in a time where people are finally figuring themselves out, figuring the things that they like, figuring what they want to pursue. Like, these are the most critical times in our life, and I'm taking it so seriously. To answer that question, I think every big passion comes from an experience, a once lived or observed experience that has conflicted our minds or has kind of been very conscious within us. So I'm the youngest of 3 girls. I was going to say and a brother, but I'm the youngest of 3 girls. And when you see your own family suffering, and it doesn't seem like suffering from something from the environment, but literally seeing what their body is doing to them and their outside behaviors and how they're feeling, as a young girl, it scares you. Right. I'm terrified. My sisters we have a really big age gap, and I found out that they were diagnosed with both endocrine disorders. So my sister, one of them was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. I actually talked to 3 girls today, just randomly, telling them about what I do. All have PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome. Ultimately, that is an excess of your androgen hormones, like testosterone, for example. And ultimately, there are these cysts that are kind of lingering in our ovaries, and we don't know the cause. We don't know why this happens. And
so you saw your sisters, they struggle with this.
I saw my sisters struggle with this every single day, to the point where they would become hospitalized after fainting in class or just fainting in the home. So as a little girl, I was like...
And how old were you when this happened? Little girl?
4.
4?
I was 4 years old when I was seeing my family going through this. And I was like, what is this? What's going on? I'm like, why is this happening? And so I grow older, and as things continue to progress, my oldest sister is still not diagnosed yet. Symptoms are not alleviating. And what happens is start questioning, am I next? Am I going to start fainting like my sister's fainting? Feeling the pain that my sister is feeling as well. And that left a really big question. So when at least having a big age gap, I had to go ahead and make sure I changed my lifestyle. I had to change literally everything. from what I consumed to my energy to everything else. I had to change. Because when you know you're in a space with people who are not thriving, it's not a good place to be in. It kind of reminds me of that idea of if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. But that's also something in regards to your health. So once I took a step back, started changing my environment, my lifestyle, I haven't still yet been diagnosed or have an endocrine abnormality. And I think as humans, we're very curious. So research has always been something I always wanted to involve myself in, especially at a young age. I was really blessed to have that opportunity too, because there are many individuals who don't have that opportunity to just really explore these kind of career types unless you have a parent or an adult in your life who's able to give it to you. Because on the other hand, I wasn't given that opportunity. I had to create that opportunity. I had to be very aware. And I think that was also what was really awesome about being the youngest. It's because I was able to learn from everybody else's mistakes.
Wow.
There's always a difference in living and experiencing this mistake or a mistake. I just observed. I sat back, I observed, and I was like, I'm not doing that.
Wow. So this is insane. So you're 4. Just like being in an environment where she's witnessing so much struggle from this very specific problem. One of the things about you that I really admire is that you have a very clear vision for what you want. So you're able to you mentioned you got to create your own opportunities. But it's one thing to create opportunities for yourself, but also create opportunities for yourself that matter. And so you get the vision when you're 4. I'm curious to know, do you think that people, how do you think people can find that vision at such an early age? Because sometimes I don't even know guys. I don't even know. I'm 19. I don't even think I have even such a clear vision. And it seems like this is something that you've just found just by really observing and really knowing what the pain points of those that really matter to you around you are, and how it aligns with you. So I'm wondering, how would you help someone find that same kind of vision? Is there do you think that for you is irreplaceable, or because of your environment and your upbringing, or is finding a vision, especially for people that might be in college, is there a different process that you would take? What are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
I have a really fascinating quote.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to bring it back to my memory.
Oh,
my
you're
gosh.
good.
It's when you come from struggle, when I came from a place where I knew I had to fend so I don't become like the people before me. That was a really big motivator. I think curiosity is a very natural thing as children. We want to know what's up. We want to know what's happening. And I was really blessed to have that struggle. Looking back on it, you'd be really surprised. I would be really surprised that I'm telling myself I'm really glad I had that struggle.
Oh, wow.
Because there's those leaps that you go through, and there's a lot of lessons that you learn throughout the process. If life was so easy to me at the time, I probably wouldn't even have a clue in the world of what I would want to do. What I'm really blessed with is there's 2 different types of students. This is what I think. It's either, and I'm going to give an example.
Yeah.
Say you're really interested in computer science. There's a lot of students interested in computer science nowadays, even though that market is very
tight.
Oversaturated right now.
Tight.
The student who's interested in computer science doesn't know which aspect of computer science they want to get into. So they explore which aspect of computer science they want to get into.
Right.
Same with any other field.
Yeah.
For me, for an example, I knew which aspect of science I wanted to get into. I immediately was like, endocrinology. And that's shocking, because as a kid, I was like, yeah, I really like this. I want to pursue it. I'm going to do it. Not once did I think I was actually going to follow through.
Really?
I didn't think I was really going to follow through at a point.
That's surprising.
Because it's like, there's so many other things in the world. You've caught me you caught me being so interested in finance, interested in business, interested in CS, interested in AI specifically. And I've allowed myself to explore those things. But what does she always come back to? She always goes back to this idea of endocrinology and research. And I was like, wow, this is something I could actually observe for the rest of my life. which is a big thing. Life is long. So those are the different types of students I think there are. Ones who have a general interest of one specific industry or multiple, but don't know which aspect to go into, or the ones who know exactly what it is. But do I go into biomedical engineering? Do I go into getting my MD and becoming a doctor? Do I go into research? Do I go into teaching? Like, what do I do? Those are two different types of students. And I think as you grow up, students are very much tailored to a certain idea based off how they grew up. And I think students who come from struggle, if there's no guidance for those students at all, if I didn't have my sister who somehow got into college and somehow I attained everything that she went through and all the struggles and all of her lessons, and I didn't really understand them, I didn't really comprehend them, or I didn't care to comprehend them, there would have been no way I would have went to college. There would have been no way I would have had an entrepreneurial spirit to pursue what I pursue now. There would be no way that I would think about research or whatever else I wanted to do at the time. And it's really sad to see that sometimes. Because the people in my community, looking back at them now, you really wish it could turn out a different way.
And where was your community? Where do you call them?
They were just really silly kids. And kids are silly, but they were never instilled this serious idea of life. They were never instilled what life really is and how important the things that you do when you're young will establish the rest of your life. And that's us going back to this idea of why these years for us are so crucial. We're college students. We're just trying to make it day by day.
So
Absolutely.
I have something that you said, like this word that just really stuck to me. It's just this word of struggle, right? Because it just sounds like through the struggle you found your vision. And one thing I've been thinking a lot about, because this is also like pierces into one of the internal conversations I've been having about my life, is whenever I'm struggling with something, I don't know, it could be something super basic. Like I'm in a calculus class, it's at 8 p.m., it's a lot, 8 p.m. calculus is never fun, but my professor, he brings that energy. Shout out to Professor K, he's great. But one thing I've learned is that the person who struggles the most with the material, regardless of how quote-unquote intelligent or smart you might see them to be, or they might actually be with the discipline that they're learning, the person who's able to contain more struggle in their learning is the one who actually excels.
Absolutely.
My question for you to be, do you see enough college students or enough people trying to start things, start their careers, start something big? Do you see them like having a healthy relationship with struggle? How would you even see, because you seem like someone who has like a very high capacity to deal with struggle and who has used that to fuel your vision. How do you do that?
That stems from times and times again of where I was forced to. And you're forced to be in that environment and get through it. It's a really great thought about this idea of struggle, because these institutions at times don't want you to win, to simply put it. But some of them, that's a really great question. Can you reiterate? That's a really great question.
No, that's all right.
Because that idea of struggle that we've been talking about this, me and you, of the things that we've been going through this past semester. We've been talking about the things that we've been going through these past few months. And it's been some of the hardest periods of my now adult life. And while struggle initially helped me have this kind of capacity, it can also really tear you down, but to build you back up again. I think if it wasn't for the challenges that I went through this past semester, I would have had to experience them later on eventually. I might as well experience them as early as I can, so I can continue to fail and fail and fail as young as I am.
I have a question. So if you had to go to the person, if you had to go to the Maryam, it could be at any point, but the Maryam who was at the point in their life where they were struggling the most, and the person that you are today, go to that person, what would you have told that person to get them out of that situation, or to help them get out of there, get out of the trenches?
That one period, I have one period in my life.
Yeah.
And it was the period, it was the range the age range of 16 to 17 years old,
Yeah.
I had a mindset instilled in my mind that I wasn't going to go to college.
Really?
Yeah. And it's not that I wasn't good at school. I actually used school to be an escape, which is really silly because you're going to think that kids at that age are doing absolutely anything else but studying and going to school.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I moved to my environment. It wasn't until that I moved to Washington, D.C. And I had the privilege of having an accelerated just level standard of education, a high standard of education. And mind you, I never thought this was going to happen. This was during a time where somebody really close to me got really hurt physically, and they were unable to care for themselves at a point. So I ended up moving with my sister. Bless her soul. She practically took me in and was my guardian for a good amount of time. And while I thought this was probably one of the worst things in my life, it was one of the biggest blessings, because if that experience did not happen, I don't think I would be here right now. And if I told her to just trust, just believe that you're going to be put in spaces that you know you will be in, that you are going to accelerate to this capacity, that you're going to finally find curiosity, that you're finally going to actually enjoy what you're looking into, she would be shocked.
Yeah.
She'd be like, what are you talking about? You're 16, 17 years old thinking, oh, I'm going to go to trade school, I'm going to go do this, have some bum job, because I think at the time I didn't know what I wanted to do. That's not a good thing to say at all.
You were like 16 or 17.
I was 16, 17. And I'm not saying, I'm not saying trade school is going to correlate to having a bum job, but I'm talking about the job that I would have if I was 15 just wanting to work for a few extra hours.
Right.
And seeing my own parent have to endure that kind of lifestyle, that's why I think I noted that idea. So if I was speaking to her right now, I would have told myself to continue to believe that there are better things that are coming for you. Because I realized that once you put yourself in better spaces, once you put yourself in spaces where you are not the best, you will get a lot out of it. And it's really hard to understand that at first because you're not in that kind of environment. And no one's telling you to go into that kind of environment.
Right.
No one's saying, oh, you need to be in this space, and this space. Unless you have some sort of privilege or people who've already been through the process. But when you are a little girl just trying to navigate the world on her own with limited guidance, it can be really hard. I think we tend to not believe in ourselves as much as we should. We tend to downplay our accomplishments and who we are looking back on it. So I would also tell her that you're doing a great job for what you've been given.
Something that, wow, there's so many things I want to talk about.
I love it.
I know there are like a lot of things I want to ask, but I'm going to actually touch on the thing that you just finished off with, is that your younger self just didn't see it. And I think there has to be like a internal conversation on self-worth that kind of happened in between too. I'm wondering, have you ever had like a moment where you're like, wow, this is who I'm worth? Anytime in between that period? If so, could you go back and tell us how you arrived at that point where you're like, this is my self-worth, I'm going to own it, and my life is going to change? You ever had one of those moments, or is it different for you? And where did that come from?
This idea of self-worth is very important in order to really establish yourself and put yourself in places that you don't even really belong in. But you're there. You managed to sneak yourself in there. And it's deserving. It's well-deserving once you're in those kind of spaces. I realized my self-worth when I was finally around people who actually believed and valued me. When I moved to that high school, my best friends were probably my teachers. I know that's lame. It was during COVID. And when I moved to this new school, everything was on Zoom.
Oh.
Everything was on Zoom. I don't think anyone really wanted to talk. Everyone was doing the bare minimum. Everyone was going through it. Everyone was getting sick. My closest friends at the time were the teachers.
Right, you were the yapper in the class.
Because I was literally the yapper in class.
Professional yapper.
I was a professional yapper. But that got me things.
Yeah?
That got me to start talking.
Okay.
That got me to start communicating.
Dang, she was podcasting.
Podcasting is so funny.
Mhm.
That got me to actually get out of my comfort zone
Yeah.
and really just communicate to people because there was nothing else to do.
Mhm.
Let's be honest. It was COVID. People were really doing the
Wow.
bare minimum. People were going through a lot of things.
So for you, you say the way you find your self-worth is just by surrounding yourself with people that believe in your self-worth, right? And being in that kind of environment was what helped you the most.
Absolutely. When
Uh-huh.
we're young and we want to instill this idea of self-worth to our children, we need that guidance from a young age.
Mhm.
And we need to see individuals who already know their self-worth because it inspires you. And once I saw professionals knowing their self-worth, once I saw them implying this kind of behavior onto me, that changed everything.
Dang.
Because I started to be more confident. I started to speak more. I started to participate. I was the only one in class turning on that camera. Like,
Wow.
it was, and I got so comfortable with that idea, especially during COVID being that whole year, that when I would start presenting myself, people started speaking about me in rooms that I wasn't even in.
Oh, interesting.
And I would get told that too. I think as students and in a society
Mhm.
where we're constantly questioning our self-worth,
Mhm.
it's quite troubling because we're also constantly being told that we're not good enough for a specific thing. Everything that we're really trying to aspire to do is so incredibly competitive nowadays.
Mhm.
I have to work so hard to stand out in front of a 400-person class now.
Yeah.
The oversaturation in many of our markets nowadays, the constant feelings of not being valued or not feeling valued because we're putting ourselves in spaces where we're not valued at all and we're accepting it.
So you mentioned that the situation being like in a 400 student classroom, right? I'm like wondering, because you're in Cornell, you're on the pre-med track, and you are around some of the most like the people you're working, they're dogs, right? They're just they're dogs in their field.
They're wizards.
They're wizards, right? So how do you maintain that self-worth in that environment? What helps you in doing that?
That's been one of the hardest things
Uh-huh.
I've had to work on this
Yeah.
past semester. 'Cause everyone is quite amazing.
Mhm.
Academically, everyone is at a very high
Right.
level and high caliber.
The Wizards of Cornell.
The Wizards of Cornell. You know what's really fascinating?
Mhm.
At Cornell, at least a lot of the pre-med students, currently as an aspiring endocrinologist, I know the field that I want to get into. I know the path I need to take. So I'm surrounded by a lot of those pre-med students.
Mhm.
Many of them will tell you the lowest level of things. And let me explain. So say there's a really big biochem exam coming up.
Yeah. It's clamps.
Yeah, that's our favorite class in the world. They will literally, a majority of them will literally tell you in your face, oh, I didn't study too much. Oh, I'm not going to study too much. Just to play with your mind. Just to make you feel like you don't need to as well. They kind of put in this placebo. If there's an assignment and there's a reading, for example, that is possibly being graded on, they will tell you that they're not reading whatever that needs to be read. They will tell you the opposite. They will tell you what you want to hear, but they will act on the opposite. The amount of times people have downplayed what they've done is ultimately a huge correlation to why there's so much ego, and to also, let's not forget the curves at these kinds of institutions. You're competing with your own classmates for everything. That grade matters to you. And it's really hard to get a good grade sometimes in certain rigorous courses. And these kind of environments, like these pre-med, engineering, or even business school environments, they can be extremely competitive. And it's not fun to endure. Exactly what I said. They will tell you things that you want to hear, but they will act on the opposite. They will study 10 times longer than you think, or 10 times longer as you, if it means that they will get the better grade at the end of the day.
So what do you tell yourself?
There's limited community, and I tell myself that there's ego. You stick to your own standards of what it means to learn for you. and what it means for you to retain information. These people, there are people here, a majority of Cornell students are not on financial aid. They have accessibility to the things that certain individuals did not have before. And as a first-generation student, as a student who came from struggle, it's a high caliber that you have to meet. And it's a high expectation. And it's hard for these kinds of students. But you'll acclimate. You just have to be very cautious of your environment, because it's a really harsh world. I never realized how harsh people could be academically before until I got to Cornell. Because when I spent, for instance, some of my time at American, everything felt like a breeze to me. I think there's a video of me somewhere on the internet of how I downplay the strength, or rigor, I should say, the rigor of Americans' STEM.
I remember that, actually.
That blew up. That was crazy.
Yeah.
That was a really great example. So you know what? I got what I asked for.
Yeah, for real.
I really did.
Bro, she downplayed its worth.
But I feel like I really appreciate the rigor at the same time, because it's teaching me what life is going to be like. In order to elevate yourself into some of the highest places, in order to elevate myself into some of the best schools, that kind of environment is needed. Yeah.
So, I'm just like picturing and just being in these kind of classrooms, hearing these kind of things from these people, and just constantly feeling like the sense of competition, right? And when you're having those kinds of environments, because we talked about environments a lot, like especially for you told me the importance of environments. In that kind of environments, just how hard it is to find community with people that you can trust, right? Because you also mentioned earlier that if you can't trust like the people that are around you, it kind of perpetuates this cycle where you can't experience even like growth among peers or collaboration. It really seems like your environment is just a self-feeding cycle of competition. Do you ever try to break from that at all? Do you ever see yourself as like the outlier? And ironically, is like, do you ever find yourself being the outlier, but also seeing yourself as someone who still has like something truly special, that you were designed different, you were built different? Do you ever feel that way?
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
We're in a very lonely world nowadays, with everything from social media to and how it interacts to our current interactions. Absolutely. There are days where you decide to put yourself out there and people would not reciprocate, especially when you're in such a stressful environment as well, and pressure is applied to you. There are going to be times that people are not going to be willing to even look at you or spend time on you.
Do you mind if I interject?
Yeah.
Because I want to bring in another thing.
Yeah.
How does your faith come into play in the backdrop of all this?
Ooh. Faith is a huge thing. And when we were talking about earlier of how we as humans need to be grounded in order to move with that intention, God to me is what allows me to ground myself and to be intentional with every single interaction.
Really?
It starts from that idea of our morals. The reason why we have faith and what all our faiths encompass together is the idea of kindness, to be a good human in general. And that's what a big thing with faith. There's multiple faiths. We know this. That's a really dumb thing to say. But I realize we never know what other people are going through as well.
And can you speak a little bit to how, so what is your faith? What is its background? Like where, because you told us a little bit about how it's helped you. Tell us about a bit about where that came from for you. And because I think the way that interweaves, because we talked a lot about the struggle, the environment, the process of scaling, and then going to, because it's crazy to think that the high school Maryam, who was in Zoom classes, advocating for herself, is now in Cornell. That's huge leaps. And I'm sure that your faith interweaves into that story in a really beautiful way. But tell us a bit more how that started, because I'm pretty sure some of our listeners, they may not even be familiar with it. They may not be spiritual, they may not be people of faith, and they might be curious about hearing how something like that, starting something like that into their lives, can take their lives to the next level. Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened to you?
The utilization of this discernment has been very much implemented when things started getting good, oddly enough. You would think that people start going to their faith when things get really dark.
Yeah.
But when things start spiraling up and things are happening for you, and then you see a bit of a failure, you start questioning what's going on. Specifically, I came from a multi-religious background, so a good amount of my family is Muslim, also Christian. Beautiful faith, beautiful background, both of them. I had the privilege of being able to observe both of them, learn from both of them, and apply both of them. What was really wonderful about my family is that they managed to communicate everything very well and very much limited the arguments behind the differences within faith, but more so focused on the ones that were similar. And while there's always those like Karens of the family, that's still never
Shout out to the
Karens. That's still never pushed me away from applying faith to myself. Faith wasn't a big thing growing up, and I think we always have to.
Yeah.
We're always, we're taught a certain thing when we're young that affects what we think about ourselves, our worth, how we apply ourselves, our interests. But with faith, you're able to go through failures and you're able to be okay with it. We're always told that we need to fail when we're younger, and we need to fail when we're young. This is the best time to make mistakes, the best time to learn. And it's true. But when I started getting myself opportunities that I never thought I could get before, it was a sense of gratitude with my faith. And it was also an ask when I would apply myself. Recently, I had the pleasure of applying to a huge program that I never thought I would ever apply to in my life. We all apply to multiple things. As students, we have to constantly apply ourselves, and apply ourselves even more. And with that comes a lot of failures. And with that comes a lot of rejections. A lot of, I'm sorry you did not get this offer. A lot of, oh, we think you're a really great candidate, but we will not move forward with the application.
Yeah, we get clamped with these all the time.
I hate those emails. Yeah. And recently, a lot of opportunity. Recently, the programs that I have applied to, they didn't turn out successful. Actually, in a sense, it kind of hurts when you have some sort of dream program, like, wow, I really want to apply myself to this. I know I'm capable. You have that self-worth. You have that confidence. You know you can do it. And it doesn't turn out the way you want it to. And in a sense, I use faith as a way of manifestation. That's what it ultimately is. And I told myself, I said, yeah, I might have not gotten this opportunity now, but a better one's coming for me. A better one is coming for me. A better one is coming for me. And what happened? A better one came for me. In a sense, it's not necessarily a way to cope, but it's a way to allow myself to continue to applying myself in that space. That was not a very good example.
No, I mean, look, with faith, because I'm also a person of faith, and one of the things I've realized about my faith is that it infuses a sense of calling into your life.
Absolutely.
And one of the most brilliant, and by the way, this also applies for people who aren't people of faith, right? Because calling still applies. Each of us have a calling in our life. Is that there are two, imagine like a scale, right? Not a scale, like a pendulum. And on one side of the pendulum, you have your design as a human being, right? You have the way that you were naturally geared or wired as a person. For example, you might be a natural creative, and you might have a way of expressing art and beauty and things that really captivate people, that people who are just more rational and logical might not. But the people who are designed to be rationals and logicals, they'll be able to find patterns and to identify things that people who are creative, it'll take them twice as much effort and time. So you have design on one end of the pendulum, and at the other end of the pendulum, you have your calling. And that's the thing that you were called to do. If you read Robert Greene's books, he has this one amazing book called Mastery, and he calls this is called a life task. is the thing that we all have to do in our life. One thing we have to complete. The thing that we don't complete, there's like an emptiness, there's a void in us that's telling us that you can do more. And one beautiful thing about faith is that it really has a really beautiful way of orchestrating this pendulum, where you're aware of your design, of the way that you're able to do things as a human, and then be able to go to the other way, where where you're reminded of your calling, of your life task, that you're meant to do more, that you're called to do higher things, better things. And I think when you have a way of using both of those things, when your design can push you and your calling can pull you, that can create like a really powerful force in your life. Shout out to Erwin McManus. That's actually his stuff, but I think it really applies well into what you were saying. Mm-hmm. It's a really beautiful thing, and thank you for sharing about that. Another thing that I wanted to talk about has to do with your role as a fitness influencer. So you also have your own fitness platform, and I'm curious to know, how did that come into play into your life, and why did you start that?
Ooh, y'all, this fitness account has been honestly so wonderful. I was watching the growth especially from last year. I remember we had a little bit of, you gave me this really cute origami that I put in one of my videos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the swan, right?
Yes,
I remember that.
And that swan blew it up.
I told you it would.
Yeah,
I told her that, if you put this one in your video, it's going to blow up. And it did.
We got to make its appearance, come back again. So a lot of things, when it came to the fitness journey, I wanted to gain that strength within myself, first of all. Mm-hmm. Second of all, there's a lot of miscommunication, misguidance when it comes to the fitness journey. Mm-hmm. And 3, I wanted to document my own journey. I think that way of reflection, I'm now able to look back years ago and be like, this is where you came from. And it's not a life story, it's my fitness story. It's how did I get from once over-consumer, once unhealthy young child to a grown, healthy adult who can now make better decisions, who can now feel good in her skin. And one thing I also wanted to do is I wanted to impact the women, not just in my life, but globally, to be able to feel the same. I think that's a big sign of empowerment, because when you are told at a young age that you can't do something, oddly enough, that drove me to being like, no, I actually can. And to have the confidence to even start a page was something that still shocked me to this day. But ultimately, I think it instilled a bigger confidence in me looking back at it now. It's something I established. It's something that I can talk about. It's something that can create an area and space to let other people know that they can talk to me about their health problems as well. So that's probably one of the biggest things with this fitness account. It's incredibly intentional moving forward, and it allows me to really live slow.
There you go.
It really does.
And move fast as a result.
And move fast, because now that I look back on it, 2, 3, 4 years ago, that felt like just yesterday. But to create this kind of content and to really allow people to feel what I'm feeling, because it's oddly enough a unanimous feeling. We all have these feelings of doubt. We can all have these feelings of unsatisfaction. Some people just don't even know where to start. I don't know where to start with some things. That's okay.
So for the person that so let's say you're like a person who wants to start their own fitness, or it doesn't have to be a fitness influencing platform. Let's say they want to start a platform on social media. How would you help that person start and get to the point where you are today? Break it down.
Ooh, that's great. One, at least we see social media now, you got to be unique. One thing about you is that you got to be unique, or you got to have some sort of defining characteristic that is going to set you apart from the rest. That's number 1. 2, highly recommend making a plan of when to post. Ensure that it's consistent. It doesn't necessarily have to be frequent, but there are certain aspects of your page that do need to be frequent. If, for example, you're using a social media like Instagram, for example. And also moving forward, I think depending on your content, you can have more quality versus quantity, and vice versa. We're seeing the people who get some sort of clout off a certain post, they usually tend to create the exact same ones over and over and over. And that's probably their defining characteristic. But in order to be a long-term creator, you have to be versatile. You have to be able to create content that's relatable and that's going to catch the attention of everyone else. So for the process itself, be intentional. Know your themes. Know how the algorithm will work. We are now constantly being infused with this idea of AI because it's there. And now we have to start to learn how to work with this specific algorithm and how the algorithm will change and understanding it moving forward.
What has been the most helpful strategy or tactic that you've applied that has helped you grow your platform the most recently?
I have a document for every single week, for every single month. Shout out Notion.
Shout out Notion. For real, we love Notion, Craft, and all these other platforms.
Best calendar ever. Just honestly, if I lost Notion, I lost my life because everything is on Notion.
Use the Notion calendar, the new one?
Absolutely.
It's great.
Yeah, I agree. And I write down the days, which days I'm posting, what the content is, and the days I'm posting stories, plus reels, etc., etc.
So you can plan out your stories. You're very granular.
Exactly. But you can have flexibility with these kind of stories. But it's more so giving a minimum. I'm going to post 3 today. I'm going to post only 2. I'm going to post, this day I have to post 5. Or I have to be consistent. There has to be some sort of minimum to ensure that you're getting the most out of it.
How has a student impacted this journey for you? Because, you started this you're in college. You started this in college. How has that impacted you?
I'm starting to allocate more of my content towards college students.
Yeah.
I'm starting to, because honestly, as a college student, that's probably some of the best content I can do.
Yeah.
Being able to maneuver a lot of the content that I've been able to involve myself in has been quite easy as a college student.
Yeah,
and I think this is just the stage of my life. And this is the stage of life where I have this accessibility to do so. Also note that you don't need to have the aesthetic always, but the aesthetic is a really big help. A really big help. I'm so funny.
The one and only Maryam Bellakbira.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so silly.
Yeah. Well, look, actually, we're almost at the hour point with this. We've been talking for like 52 minutes. It's flown by. I've got a few questions I want to ask you. One of which has to do with just tell us, like, you've done so many things already. And you can see why now, because you've been through a whole journey. I mean, you published like medical works already. At the age of 19, you started your influencer platform. You're in Cornell, which is already like another thing on top of itself. You're doing all these things. What do you think is like one tip every student should keep in mind if they want to increase their capacity to do what matters for them, or just to handle life? Because you can do a lot. What do you think is that one tip that you might give out?
Put yourself in spaces that you are valued. When you start doing things, you're going to start networking, and you're going to start meeting a lot of people. You're going to start being in spaces you never thought you could be in. You're going to start involving yourself in things that have a lot of high value. And with time, while it seems great, you start to see how everyone else is moving. You start to see who's really going to be there for you at the end of the day. So while these publications might seem great, while the institution I'm at might seem like luxury, might seem like it's giving me a lot of leverage, which it is, at the end of the day, who's going to be able to celebrate that with you? Who is going to be able to be there for you when things are at your lowest and those things start to not matter as much as you thought? Because while they can give you that purpose and that drive moving forward into your career, the people who you're around is probably one of the biggest impacts on your life. Who is going to be there to speak about your name in rooms that you are not in? Who is going to be there for you to provide you an opportunity that you never thought even existed? How are we supposed to apply ourselves? We don't even know if it exists. And as humans, we're very knowledgeable. We crave those relationships. So as we are maneuvering this sometimes really hard life, having those people who are not just there for you, but can help leverage you, support you, at times needed most, or not even needed most, but to just have that community to rely on when even the tiniest of mishaps happen, you're able to apply yourself very well.
I want to wrap up with this question. What do you think is the most courageous decision you've done in your life as of today?
Honestly, that answer is also my most selfless decision I've ever done. And that's going to an institution I knew wasn't the one for me, so I could take care of somebody else. Before that, I went home after I was supposed to be in Rhode Island. I thought it was the worst decision of my life. I thought I made the biggest mistake that one could ever do. Why would I stop myself from having one of the biggest opportunities I've ever had before to stay at home and put in all my time and all my energy into somebody else? And little did I know, that was probably one of the biggest blessings I've ever had. Because if it wasn't for that, I know where I would have been. Life would have been very still. There wouldn't be as much excitement as there is now, at least with all this travel and the opportunities that are coming up. And I knew that God had a plan for me once I saw what unfolded. Because if I decided to go to Rhode Island, who knew what could have happened? But I stayed in DC, and it allowed me to work at some of the most prestigious institutions and companies that I've never thought I would be in. When you're a little girl and you didn't even think that you're gonna even go to college, then the next thing you know, you're working at NASA and you're doing research. Where did that come from?
This reminds me of one of my all-time favorite quotes. Is that courage is the absence of the self. It isn't an absence of fear, it's the absence of the self. And for you to have to make that kind of decision, to care for the people that you love the most in your life, to sacrifice an opportunity, it's just an exemplification of that. It's very beautiful.
There's a plan for you. While you or I might feel lost in one moment, a better thing is coming for you. A better thing is coming your way. And that's also a really big play with faith. Have you ever heard of the quote that struggle makes a good life, but a good life makes struggle?
Wow. It's a bar.
That quote really allowed me to understand the motivation behind what struggle is.
Struggle makes a good life, but a good life makes struggle.
When you're not able to experience certain aspects of struggle, you're not able to learn and apply it in your life. And that really makes me question some people's intent. Because while people can relate with you on that struggle, have they been able to experience or really see what it's like on an interpersonal level? And mind you, this is for individuals who didn't come from guaranteed wealth.
So, Maryam, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the pod, for sharing your story, sharing your vulnerability. Like this has been like a really profound episode. And I just thank you for allowing us to just see what goes on and a little bit inside of what's going on inside of your inner world. And to just share with us some of your insights on how to help you become like a baller in your field, in life, in school, in faith, in all these different areas of life that really matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have another thought.
Final thought? Go ahead. Wrap us up.
As students, we tend to mask a lot of the things that are going on in life. The most common phrase that people use is, quote unquote, when they answer the question, how are you? What's the most common phrase? What do you think?
Good. Just good.
Good, fine, exactly. I think as students, as humans, we tend to mask the things that we're going through because we want it to seem like we're okay. Because we have that standard within ourselves. Because society has that kind of standard. And I think it's finally time that we have some of that vulnerability and share this kind of exposure. because all of us are going through something that can be really hard to maneuver. And we're seeing that a lot in how our population is moving, how we're seeing that a lot in our youth as well, which is quite concerning. We're seeing that a lot within college students and the troubles that we're all having every single day. I know we spoke a little bit about our experiences this past semester. Probably one of the hardest experiences, probably some of the hardest experiences we had to go through. What made you get out of that slump?
Me?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Let me think. So, sure. Last semester, I took this core finance class. I'm a finance major, and every finance major has to take this core finance class known as business finance, also known as Fin 365. And one of the things that happened last semester was that I failed it. I failed literally the most, it's basically like finance 101 if you're a finance major. And what's ironic is that I was also a part of an investment fund. And before anyone says anything like what is this kid who didn't pass finance 365 doing in an investment fund?
Can I share this real quick?
Yeah.
I also failed a class last semester.
What?
Yo,
really?
My first ever class failed.
Which one?
I'm being so for real. It's crazy. I created cheat sheets for that class, and I sold them.
Oh, really?
But trust, there's good reasons on why.
How much did you make
on
those cheat sheets?
Right now it's getting about a
grand or two. No, you're dying.
It's 65 for the the full set. And then I have one of just all the organic chemistry. Yeah, there we go. That's organic chemistry. I have one of all the organic chemistry reactions. Yeah, but trust.
I'm still. I don't know whether I don't know whether. Okay, I don't know whether to focus on the fact that this is the first time you're hearing this, or the fact that you are making a grand off of cheat sheets.
And trust, they have really great reviews too. It's definitely helped me.
Should we link in the bio this cheat sheet?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can link them in the bio so people can buy your cheat sheet if they're going through the trenches in organic chemistry. Buy Maryam's organic chemistry cheat sheet if you're struggling.
So funny.
How long did it take you to do all that? To create them? Did you do it as you went?
I tried to, and then they looked really bad. So I redid everything, and I think it took me about 3 weeks.
How did you get the idea because you just wanted to help people out that went through it, or?
Absolutely. I think I failed because I didn't take the final exam. And also, the class is really struggling. At least at first.
Yeah, chem is hard.
But honestly, with knowing all the content and passing organic chemistry too, so I promise I'm qualified to share the content. And it was also verified by my TAs and even my professor.
That's insane. It's just how you're able to monetize your struggle.
Yeah.
Monetize your struggle.
But let's get back to what you were talking about. I also just wanted to relate to you on that idea that I also failed.
Okay, that's so interesting. I mean, I'm still that's incredible. $1,000 off a cheat sheet. We should just name this episode "How to Make $1,000."
How to make $1,000 off of your cheat sheets.
Okay. Wow. So Fin 365 cheat sheet coming out soon. Yeah.
I'll be waiting.
For all my finance students out there, I was in this investment fund environment, and I was doing really well in it. Actually, I had the best pitch out of 56 pitches because the way the fund worked is that you would pitch a stock that the fund will buy, and at the end of it, they would vote on it. And whether your stock or not got voted, we would buy it. And we managed about $1 million in assets for this fund. So it's like an actual fund environment that's run by students. So I was in this environment. It looked like I was winning. I was one of the youngest people, if not the youngest person in that environment, doing this thing. And there came a point where my internal world got so suffocated that I wanted to literally die. I was just losing it. We talked about sleep before the call. I was getting the least amount of sleep I was getting in my life. So that does really mess with your mind a bit. Messes with your emotions. We talked about faith. It also disrupts your faith a lot. And community. It also disrupts community. It really impacts all facets of life. And what happened was I failed the class, And the day I failed, I got the exam score back. And it's funny because the exam score was originally like really high, but then like the professor sent one of those oops, fixed, check now kind of emails. And then I saw my score just tanked. And I was like, okay, well, I failed. About a day after that, I was sitting in office hours with the guy who with the professor who facilitated the fun environments for the students, telling him I had to quit. And that began a very long process of letting go. Letting go one thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. And letting go was probably one of the hardest things I had to do. And the fund was just one of the career commitments that I had to let go. Mm-hmm. But it really worked out. And I'd love to spend a ton of time just talking about how it all worked out beautifully. That's a whole nother podcast episode in itself. But I do want to talk about one other part, something that goes deeper than that. Because I was very stressed while this all happened. And something that I realized about myself, now in retrospect, I didn't know this at the time, but while I was going through that period where I was like really in the trenches, really like, again, internal world was very suffocated as a student, I realized that my reactions and responses to those, the situation I was in, from falling behind in work, triggered a lot of responses that actually had to do with an addiction I'd overcome in high school. And it all came from being behind. And I don't think I would have made it out of that environment without going back to my old self if it weren't for one thing. And that one thing is investing in my character. And how was that? How did that actually help me? Well, it goes back to something you mentioned earlier. It's about investing into spaces or finding spaces where people will make you feel valued or will make you go down a path where you're investing into the person that you're becoming. And in that same semester, I, for the first time, was a part of like a high-level learning community. Some people call them masterminds, some people call them coaching communities. But I was a part of a high-level learning community called Arena. And it was in that environment where people were able to push me into realizing that this immense amount of pain, yeah, most of it was self-inflicted. Yeah, I made some mistakes. But that struggle was going to turn me into a person that would be like, wow, I can handle hard things. I can handle tough things. And so I think that environment saved me. It literally saved me. I don't think if I had that environment, I would have made it, both in the sense where I was able to rebound from that and also have a character to make it through those kinds of environments and without falling back into the person that I was in high school. And so, yeah, I was really in the trenches, but I think that having spaces where you are having people remind you of who you're becoming and letting go as a result are keys.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's a great question.
That was a really great answer.
Do you want to wrap it up here? I'll take that as a yes.
I love who we are becoming.
I love who we're becoming. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Maryam, and thank you so much for everyone who's listening. If you found at least one thing helpful in this podcast, share it with someone who's like you today. And go get Maryam's cheat sheet.
Go get my cheat sheet, y'all.
All right.
Peace.
Peace.